Welcome to PCMC. Ooh, it's Halloween 2023. This is the final chapter of Halloween 2023. What a journey we've taken as we've gone through slashix. We've talked about Halloween from 1978, the original Friday the 13th, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I'm here today to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street with my good friend Peter, Last Voyage of the Demeter, Marsh.
Oh, yes. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm actually doing good. You know, I am a big fan of this season. Spooky season is what I live for. It's basically a 2-month film festival that I curate for myself where I watch just a ton of horror. Like I know you and Danny for the Lasher cast, you kind of consume horror all the time. I like save it like from September 1st to October 31st. It's like I get it all out of the way, and then I watch period dramas for the rest of the year. No, I watch a lot of sci-fi bullshit.
Oh, sci-fi bullshit's great. I love that too. So is it kind of like on your plate? You eat all the vegetables and stuff first, and then you put all the horror stuff on the side, and that's how you consume it, how you consume your media?
Well, it's like in a way, yeah, like well, I love everything I consume. I never like watch something that I don't want to, you know. But
Yeah.
like this week I watched Possessor and Infinity Pool, two movies by Brandon Cronenberg.
Right.
And I was like, and I wrote
You
my
want
master's
to
thesis on David Cronenberg, so like I was like big into Cronenberg. So I
yeah.
was like, okay, I'm gonna wait for October to watch them, and
Mhm.
because I know they're gonna be. Have you seen those movies?
I've seen Possessor. I haven't seen Infinity Pool.
Infinity Pool, I think, is even. It's not as good a movie, but it's more depressing.
Mm-hmm.
It more like is you'll come away from it feeling like, oh,
Yep.
like dead.
That's pretty bad considering how much of a downer Possessor is too.
Yeah, yeah. Possessors are better high concept, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you do? How do you celebrate this time of year? What do you have different consumption of media?
Well, it's funny because there's so much stuff out right now, right? Obviously for different film studios, they're like, okay, we got to put out all of our Halloween stuff. We got to put out all our scary stuff out right now. So you have a whole bunch of movies that are in the theaters just right now. There's like streaming stuff. Our show is called The Lasser Cast, and that's named after the Lasser glass, which is the mirror that's in Mike Flanagan's movie Oculus, right?
Mm.
And we started out as like a Mike Flanagan channel, and he has a show that's out right now called Fall of the House of Usher, which is on Netflix.
Okay, how is that? Have you seen?
It's good. It's weird because I've only watched one episode so far, and it feels like he's trying to do Succession. And it's weird for like Mike Flanagan to do
Right,
Succession.
right. It seemed like a real different because like I've read the story and I saw the original film with Vincent Price, and it
Yeah.
seems like he's kind of doing like what he did with Haunting of Hill House, like
Hmm.
taking a short story and making a series out of it and just putting a bunch of other shit into it. Because this
Hmm.
is like an Edgar Allan Poe like hodgepodge of bullshit.
Yes, that's one thing that's really interesting about Mike Flanagan is that like he did Midnight Club, which was basically there's a book by Christopher Pike called Midnight Club, and the
Yeah.
concept is it's a bunch of kids that tell stories to each other because they're all in this house where essentially they're going to die of cancer, right? And they basically added a lot to it. They took different Christopher Pike stories and made those
Right.
be the stories the kids were telling. And then he also did Haunting of Bly Manor, which is like I'm trying to think what the author is, Henry James, right? And that's like a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's like a story, the turning of the screw. That's like the main plot, but then they stuck a bunch of other Henry James stories in there too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen I like him. I like Dr. Sleep.
Oh yeah.
I like his stuff. I've actually never seen Oculus, but
It's pretty good. Have you ever seen Hush?
no.
It's like a home invasion movie, and his wife is the main character, and she's
Oh,
deaf.
okay. I have
Yeah.
not seen it, but I now I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
he does a lot of shit with Netflix.
He absolutely does. But his Netflix contract just ended, so he's going to start doing stuff with Prime now.
Isn't he supposed to be doing like a Dark Tower series?
Oh yes.
Gonna really happen though? I've lost hope with that.
Yeah, probably rightfully so. I don't know what's happened. That it's not been talked about since all the strikes have gone on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this morning I rewatched A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984, and god damn, is it a good movie. Like, I've seen this movie so many times in so many different contexts, and the context that we're sort of looking at it today is in the slasher craze.
Mhm.
And like, no offense to Sean S. Cunningham, but like, people always compare Freddy and Jason. If you just took Friday the 13th Part 1 and The Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1, I mean, one's fucking Citizen Kane and the other's like Clerks. Like,
Yes, yes,
just
yes.
like the everything about this movie is like, the acting is amazing, the writing is amazing, the
Right.
production design is amazing, the music's amazing, the sound effects are amazing. It's like
Hmm.
such a cut above all that other stuff.
Yes.
Um, I just honestly like love it.
Yeah. You know what's funny, Mike, is that I don't know if I've ever sat down and watched it from beginning to end until yesterday.
Really.
But yeah, yeah. This happens a lot to me where just growing up and having like HBO on my TV, I would always just get snippets of movies and I'd usually see like the end first, then the middle. And
Yeah.
yeah, I could like kind of put a movie together like a Frankenstein monster, but I don't think I've ever sat down and watched this straight through.
Wow. So how was that experience?
It was great. I mean, I ended up watching the documentary Never Sleep Again,
Oh
which
yeah.
was about this. And we covered Wes Craven on the Last cast a couple of months ago. We covered about a bunch of his films that weren't Scream or Nightmare on Elm Street.
Mhm.
And I just really, really appreciated him after watching this movie and watching that documentary.
He's a wild guy because he
Yes.
grew up in a very strict religion where he did not watch any films until he was an adult, which is crazy because it's like we all are consuming movies and media all the time. And he couldn't, he was not allowed. And then, like, I think he became a teacher. He wasn't that young even when he started working. Like, he already had like a family and a career. And then, like, the first thing he makes is Last House on the Left, which is like brutal movie.
Yeah.
And then you've got this, and yeah, of his non-scream, non-nightmare stuff, what do you think's the best?
I haven't seen all of it. We just watched like Shocker. We watched The People Under the Stairs. The People Under the Stairs is actually Danny's favorite. For that question, he
Uh,
loves The People Under the Stairs a lot. Um, Red Eye is even kind of good for what it is, I think. I don't know. I Scream is my favorite horror franchise. So that's kind of
okay.
my go-to is the first Scream. Um, but I like the original Hills Have Eyes. I'm actually a huge fan of the Hills Have Eyes remake too.
Yeah, yeah. You're not alone with that. It's a
Yeah.
very good remake.
Yeah. I mean, he had nothing to do with that, but
Yeah,
I appreciate that. And it's weird, like you were just saying before, how he didn't start making movies until later in life. He was like 30 years old when he got into filmmaking.
it's crazy. It's
Yeah.
so you're around the same age as me, right?
I'm 41.
I just turned 40. So, what's your like history with Freddy
Okay.
growing up in the 80s?
Yeah, yeah. You know, like I said, I watched a lot of these movies on HBO, and it's usually just pieces of them. And I think that I probably watched Dream Warriors the most out of all of them.
Sure, of course.
I usually would see a lot of the later sequels,
Mhm.
and I watched as far as like going to see a Freddy movie in the theater. I watched Freddy versus Jason,
Yeah.
and then I haven't seen the remake. I think that's the only fucking one I've seen in the theaters, Freddy versus Jason.
Wow. I like the remake, by the way. A lot of people hate it. I don't. I did not mind it at all. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, but I think you're right. Like, because of our age, we just couldn't. Like, what we were like, what, 12 when Freddy's Dead came out, or New Nightmare?
I
Like,
mean
maybe
it's
I could have
even.
seen a New Nightmare, but right, Freddy vs. Jason is the only one I saw in the theater. But this was like a VHS classic. Like, I have an
Hmm.
older brother. He
Yeah.
watched them all. This was something you'd watch at sleepovers. I had Freddy doll when you'd pull the string. And
Hmm.
like, my mother had no problems buying that for me. Like, I had Freddy gloves. Was
Yeah.
Freddy for Halloween when I was like 8 or something great. Like, Freddy is like our Dracula.
Yes.
Like, Freddy is he's above all these other guys. And
Yes.
it's funny, like, what we've been doing this month with these episodes is like looking at these movies as singular pieces outside of the context of their franchises.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of I forgot that there's a lot of Christian imagery in this movie, like with crucifixes and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that to me again makes me feel like very like he's like Dracula.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I mean, he kind of preys on young, innocent girls, and he kind of comes after them when they're in their nightgowns and stuff, or
Yeah.
they're, like, they're in bed, and that's kind of the imagery of like the Bela Lugosi Dracula is like he comes in through the window. Freddy just is already in there with you in your dreams. But that's interesting that you make that comparison because usually when people talk about Freddy, they call him the boogeyman. You know?
Yeah. I think another thing that's refreshing when you watch the original movie is the image of Freddy. First of all, like Freddy, as the series goes on, it's like he's the protagonist you're rooting for. And
Mm-hmm.
he's fully lit. You could totally see him. In this first movie, you can't get a really good look at him for a while. He's shrouded in darkness, and he's not Bugs Bunny. He's not Groucho Marx, like quip, quip, quip. He's not wearing sunglasses on the beach, going like "Surf 10, bitch," like, like whatever the fuck. Like he's a monstrous guy who has a regular name, Freddy, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not like it's so interesting that he became like someone who had his own TV show and like,
Yeah.
bubblegum and bullshit. Like it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, he's like one of those iconic horror monsters that you just see them so often and they get parodied in things too, and they just sort of lose their edge, right? Like the
Yeah.
xenomorph is like terrifying, but you see like the xenomorph in like kids' cartoons and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with Freddy. Like just over time, he's just gotten diluted. Like that first movie, I liked your idea of watching this and making it like you had it with a fresh set of eyes. You're not thinking about the sequels. I think that this would have been really scary to see in the theater.
I mean, if you had, you especially, yeah, if you were walking in and you didn't know anything about it, I think it would be terrifying. It's got a couple of really good jump scares, but
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like jump scares are, I think, a touchy topic because some people think that they're very cheap. Some people don't. Some people love them. Some people hate them. I think that jump scares are a tool, and it's fine to use tools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think in this film, they're more than just a jump scare. Like they help move the plot forward. They're not just
Mm.
ooh jump and you're scared. Like
Mm-hmm.
I probably the two biggest ones in this movie are when he comes out of the mirror in
Mm-hmm.
front of her,
Yes.
which is
Yes. Yes.
something you would never be able to guess if you didn't know it. Like it's just like
Yeah.
and when she brings him out of the dream and he comes up from behind her, that's
Yes.
that still gets me even though I know it's coming. I'm like,
That's
okay,
the best
it's gonna be
one.
any second now. It's gonna be any
Yeah.
second now.
That is the best one. I love that one. It's funny, right? Because when you watch the documentary, Never Sleep Again, they talk about how when they were doing the dailies for the movie, they the editor had a hard time discerning like what was the nightmare footage and what
Mm,
was the real life footage. And that's what's really cool about this. Even in this first movie, they really play that up where it's like,
yeah,
am I having a dream? Is this reality? And
yeah,
so, like, obviously there's the rules of the real world and then there's the rules of the nightmare world.
right,
And since you can't tell sometimes which one you're in, he could just fucking pop up anywhere,
right,
you know?
right, right. And
It-
this movie is, and I credit Wes Craven for this. This
yeah.
movie gets surrealism so much better than a lot of the sequels that came. Like later on, there was a lot of money put into it, so there's a lot of like elaborate dream sequences, like we're in a comic book, or like like we're at the beach, or we're on a talk show, like crazy shit like that. In this, it's
Yeah.
like you're in your house, you're in your school, you're in familiar places,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of weird imagery, there's things that bleed from one place to another.
Hmm.
Like at the end when she's in the dream and she pulls him out, she wakes up on her bed and you see she's got like the rose bushes and then she throws them, and then the shot zooms out. So obviously there was like someone on the film crew who pulls it out of the shot, but I didn't notice that until I was really looking at it. And it's like, oh shit, she has something physically with her, and then in the next image it's gone.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the tooth in the window, like when Tina dies, which is one of the best kills in horror movies ever.
Yes.
When she dies, before she dies, there's like a crack on her window, and she looks, and there's a human tooth in the window, and it's so surreal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic. The imagery in this movie, it starts to blend together through all the different sequels. Like, oh, does this happen in this third one? Does this happen in the fourth one? But there's certain images in this movie that are just iconic images, right? And one of my favorite ones is when Freddy is coming through the wall, like right above Nancy. And what I love about the documentary I watched is that this movie only cost like $1.1 million.
Yeah.
Right. And they were like super cheap and practical with how they made these effects. Like that effect of him coming through the wall is just him pushing up against spandex.
Yeah.
Like it's Robert Englund just pushing up against spandex on the wall.
Right.
And that kill that you just mentioned, Tina's kill, which is this crazy, incredible, iconic kill. They did this thing where they fucking made a set that could like rotate. And so like the actress that played her, she was just talking about how like she had crazy vertigo, like being on that set. Like she didn't know which was up and which was down.
Yeah.
And then they use that same set when Johnny Depp gets killed, and
which is another amazing kill.
Exactly. The imagery in this is like so iconic, and there's things in the future sequels that people always reference, right? Like you had I gotta look them up while we're talking, but there's this one fucking amazing FX artist that comes in later in the series and does some of the special effects. And then you had like other directors that are kind of visual directors, like Rennie Harlan. Oh shit, we're not supposed to be talking about different films in the series, right?
Right. It's hard not to, right?
Sorry. But like just this first movie alone, like what you said when you were doing your Halloween episode, that if they had just made this a movie and like there was no other sequels, this would be like referenced a lot because
it would be like a classic movie.
Exactly.
Not just a classic horror movie. Like people would, because it's so good. What of all the, I should say, another thing that strikes me is, interesting watching it again. Something that I don't think the other films do at all is there's a lot of times in this film where we see the outside of a dream. We see someone who's sleeping having a dream, like Tina's death, right? We don't see him crawling with her. We just see her like flipping around. Or when same thing with what's his name? With Johnny Depp.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you don't see Freddy in that sequence at all.
Yeah.
And then you don't really see when Tina's boyfriend gets killed either. You don't see what's going on.
Right.
He's murdered either.
Yeah, we're watching, that's a really weird scene because that's like a very surreal scene because she tells her boyfriend, okay, I want you to watch me while I sleep. And then we cut and they're outside and it's like foggy. And she goes, are you still there? And he comes out from behind a tree and he's like, yeah, which is crazy because it's a visual representation of him watching her sleep. And then like across the street is the police station and she can like look down into the cell. And then like 1000, he like walks through the bars. Such a good effect.
Yes.
And she's in her dream watching him be killed.
Yeah. Okay.
It's such a weird level.
I mean, Wes Craven, he's clearly like a very talented guy and like knows how to make like effective imagery and to really build up that tension. Yeah. Right. And he's the one that came up with the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. Right. And then when he got the composer, just another way that they kind of cut corners and to make things cheaper is that the composer, instead of having a whole orchestra, he just essentially made all the music at his house, right?
Yeah.
And that whole the theme that's so great in this movie, the doon 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 doon, right? That's kind of the composer took that 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, and just like amped it up and added more to it.
Yeah, it's the sound and the music are great. The way it begins, where you just hear like the high pitched note, and we see a frame within a frame of Freddy making his glove. And something else, again, when you watch it again, you see something that you didn't realize before. In this movie, Freddy is signaled or telegraphed by the sound of his claws on metal
Hmm.
a lot. It happens a
Hmm.
lot. Like you just hear the squeak of his nails, and it's almost like Jaws, like when the shark is represented by John Williams music. Like you hear
Yes.
that squeak, and you're like, "Oh shit, Freddy's around."
Yeah. That's so funny that you compare it to Jaws, like a Spielberg movie, because the actual noise of his claws kind of reminded me of like the Velociraptor noise that they would make.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Super high pitched, super
Yeah.
pitched. Um, and there's great imagery. Tina in the body bag almost kind of looks like a nun or like a. At one point, she's standing on like snakes, which I think is a Christian image. I'm not sure.
Sure.
Something like something like that. And it's just and that image appears a few times, like the Tina coming to her when she falls asleep at school. That's a great scene because there's a kid in the front of the class doing a presentation, but then when it turns into a dream, everybody's still there, but they're all the kids like whispering now,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
everybody's acting sort of slow and disaffected, and it's so weird to see everyone else acting like they're in a dream.
Hmm.
The dream work is so good in this movie. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I mean, the music and the sound design help with Craven's imagery, right?
Yeah.
Because um like the music just has this sort like I'm trying to think of how to explain it. Like it's almost like a fairy tale, the actual like theme of the
Yes.
movie.
Yes.
It's very kind of sweet and innocent sounding. And then you have sort of like John Carpenter kind of fast beat stuff when like Freddy's chasing people around. But for
Yes.
the most part, it does have that feeling of a dream. The music itself gives you that dream kind of feeling. It almost sounds like wind chimes or something. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously the sound design is really great because like, you have Freddy's claws. There's multiple scenes that are like in like a boiler room setting, and there's always like that kind of echo to Freddy's voice, and
Yeah.
that feeling that you're like trapped in another realm.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned that one sequence where Tina's in the body bag, and it's funny because we covered Shudder's 101 scariest horror movie moments of all time, and they made a point to not like just do a whole bunch of scenes from different franchises. Like they didn't do like five different Freddy moments and
Right.
six
Right.
different
Right.
Jason
Right.
moments. They only did like one per franchise. And for Nightmare on Elm Street, they did that sequence where she's in the body bag in the school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny because like, would you have put that as the scariest scene in this movie?
That's such an interesting question.
Yeah.
I joined you guys for one of your episodes covering it, and
Yeah.
we talked about how we love the documentary, but some of the choices were interesting choices.
Yeah.
Like putting an episode from Twin Peaks in it. Um,
Right.
it's funny. I know. I mean, to me, it's one of the most indelible images. But honestly, if you said you had to pick one, it would be Freddy with his arms
Hmm.
extended out.
Hmm.
Um, which again is like, if that's the bad guy, how do you have any chance? Like,
Right.
if he could be anywhere, that's the thing. Like, I love what you just said about it being a fairy tale because it feels like a fairy tale, right? But like, what's the point of fairy tales? It's to teach children that the world is not safe, to be
Hmm.
cautious. But in fairy tales, it's like, listen, don't leave home, don't go into the woods because you can't be protected by your parents in the woods. But this is like the point of this is your parents cannot protect you no matter what, and
Hmm.
you have to sleep. And in
Hmm.
so it's not the woods, it's your sleep,
Yeah.
and it's all and it's not on the beach, it's not a comic book, it's all places that you already live, your bedroom, your school, stuff like
Hmm.
that. So it's so interesting because it's like
Universal.
it's universal, but if you're going with the fairy tale thing, it's like there's no lesson to be learned almost. Like there's like
Mm.
you're basically fucked. There's nothing you can do. Like you can't say okay, you can't say just stay awake because you can't. And I love, by the way, I love the performances by all the actors who play the parents because they're all shitty assholes. Like Johnny Depp's dad is such an asshole, and of course her parents are assholes, and that's
Right.
like they're all complicit in this vigilante justice.
Yes. That's one of the most interesting things about this movie and essentially this whole franchise
Yeah,
too, is the idea that like the parents created this monster and the
yeah,
kids have to suffer the sins of the parents, right?
right.
Now, I never saw this movie, but I'm betting you did. Did you see It Follows?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I
So
did an episode on it.
okay. So like for It Follows, I've never seen it, but I've heard a shit ton about it. I've seen some clips from it and stuff. And it kind of sounds like it is kind of like a morality tale in the sense of like they're passing around this creature like a STD. Like if you have sex, you're gonna
Yeah,
give this creature to someone else, right? And that's why
it's about like I never saw it really as an STD thing, but I think it's about like the social contract. Like you can
mm,
get away from this villain by giving it to someone else. And do you
right,
do that?
right. Well, and so with this, what I thought was very interesting about this was that Freddy, like, if he basically is focused on you, essentially, if you go to sleep, he's going to kill you.
Yeah.
Like it's just guaranteed. Okay, Freddy has picked you out and he's going to kill you, so you can't go to sleep. I mean, that's the whole genesis of this movie. Like Wes Craven, he had these ideas for a while. He had read about these like Hmong refugees, right,
Mhm.
who had fled their home country and they had experienced like genocide. They'd seen such traumatic things
Yeah.
that they would have these incredibly intense nightmares. And so they didn't want to sleep because the nightmares were so horrible. And then some of them did actually die when they were asleep,
Yeah.
right? Now, the other story about Freddy, you probably know the other story of the inspiration, right? With
Yes.
the kid.
I remember a story. Wes Craven said when he was a kid, he saw a man dressed like Freddy outside his window who like basically kind of fucked with him, like stood there and like looked at him and scared the shit out of him.
Mm-hmm. And he had Freddy's hat.
Yeah.
And when Wes Craven was designing the Freddy character, the stripes on his sweater, apparently, like he had read somewhere that those two colors are very unnerving for people to look at when you combine those two particular
Yeah.
colors.
Yeah.
But you know what, Mike? That's not even the thing I was referencing. The story I'm talking about is he read an article about I think it was a kid in like Los Angeles. He was like of Asian descent, and he kept telling his parents, "I can't go to sleep. I can't go to
Uh,
sleep. If I do, this thing's gonna get me." And he eventually did fall asleep in his living room. His parents took him up into his bedroom, and then when he was asleep in his bedroom, he did die.
yeah. Wow.
And the craziness is they investigated his room. They found all the sleeping pills they had been giving him because he had insomnia. He
Yeah.
hadn't taken them. And then they also found a coffee pot in his room and it had
Yeah.
been connected by an extension cord out of the bedroom.
Which is what we see in this film. Nancy's has a coffee pot in her bedroom, and but that's the crazy thing too, right? Because it's like there's no way out of it. At one
Right.
point she says, I've been up for 7 days, but I looked up the Guinness World Record and 11 is the world record. So
Yeah.
like she's only 4 days away from dying, right? Because you have to sleep.
Hmm?
Um, as
Yeah.
Roger Rabbit tells us, Roger Rabbit's in this movie.
Wait,
He
what?
Yeah, Charles Fleischer, who's the voice of Roger Rabbit, plays the doctor at the sleep clinic.
Okay. I knew he looked familiar. I didn't realize that's the guy that like literally would be Roger Rabbit.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's crazy. Um, yeah, like going back to your point that you made about how like, you can't escape him and it's so scary and then it's also kind of like this universal thing. I think that that's what's so interesting is he almost seems like some kind of virus or something that you get. Like once you're kind of infected with Freddy, he's going to get you in your sleep and you're going to
yeah,
die.
and it's not he uses terror, I think, to power himself up, right? Because no, it doesn't sound like anyone has one dream and they're dead. Like you have a Freddy dream and you wake up and you talk about it with your friends. Like you know what I mean? It seems like you
Yeah.
have two or three Freddy dreams, and then the third or fourth is when he kills you.
Yeah, exactly. He like savors it and stuff. And they go into more detail about that in the sequels, which we're not going to talk about. But I think that
Mhm.
like in this first movie, because they don't elaborate on that, it makes it scarier. And
Yes,
I
I
also
agree.
wanted to make one point too. I didn't know if we were ever going to talk about like more about the behind the scenes stuff, but this movie was made by New Line Cinema,
Mhm.
right? And Wes Craven like shopped this movie around to all different major studios, and nobody wanted it.
Right.
Then he found Bob Shea, who's the head of New Line Cinema, and they just had like a real small office. Bob Shea was interested, and the reason why he was interested in Nightmare on Elm Street is because of what you said, which is like everyone needs to sleep.
Yeah.
So he felt like he wanted to make a horror movie that was like universal, where it
Right.
applies to
Right.
everybody. So he,
And the other studios stupidly would be like, pass on the movie because they'd be like, well, how can it be scary if you know it's a dream? Which is such a
yeah,
stupid thing to say.
right,
Because it's like, well, I know it's a film as well, but like, of course,
yeah,
if the thing that's registered on screen is frightening, it's going to be frightening. Um,
yeah.
and also,
It,
he kills you in the. It's not like it's a dream and you wake up; like you die in the dream.
yes, yes. I mean, I'm sure there were many executives kicking themselves for not picking up this movie because it was a tremendous hit when it came out. And for New Line, one of their nicknames was the house that Freddy built
Yeah,
because it
yeah.
was such a big hit for them, you know?
Bob Shea's
Um,
sister is the Lynn Shay is the teacher.
yes, yes.
Probably her biggest role though is as the creepy landlord in the movie Kingpin. Is it?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
yes,
She's
yes,
like,
yes.
I bought you some alcohol. I know you like gin, so I got you some gin.
Right, right, right. Well, so isn't she like a creepy old lady in something about Mary too, or is that a different lady?
Yes, yes, same directors.
Oh,
I
the
like
Farrelly
her a
brothers, right?
lot. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you say that her biggest role is that, but I actually think her biggest role is in Insidious.
That's true. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true. Let's talk about trying to tie in everything that I've talked about this month. Um,
Hmm.
I want to talk about suburbia because
Sure.
suburbia is such a big theme, I think, in all slasher films.
Hmm.
Like the suburbs are a consciously made phenomenon. Like we had you wanted to after World War II, you wanted people to have really good middle class lives. You wanted them
Hmm.
to buy cars and buy gas. So you said,
Right.
you know what? Instead of working where you live, which would always be the intuitive thing that everyone always did throughout time, they were like, you don't have to work where you live. You can work somewhere and then live somewhere really nice and hidden away and away from all the elements that you may think are bad elements, whatever that is racially or anything like that. And you can have like, the American dream, it changes, but the American dream, at least in the beginning, was land, right? Manifest destiny. So we'll give you a lawn, that's your little land, and you get your little house, and you have your little car, and you can have a picket fence, middle class life. And this is big in like things like Blue Velvet. Like I know you like David Lynch films.
Hmm.
My brother brought up a good point that I had never thought about, which was in the original Halloween when Laurie Strode is out on the street running from Michael. She goes up to different houses and bangs on the doors, and nobody
Hmm.
lets her in, which is kind of
Yes.
like the
Kitty
urban legend
Genovese.
Kitty Genovese.
Hmm.
If you don't know, Kitty Genovese is, I say urban legend because she was a real person, but a lot of what we know about the story is not true. But the idea
Mm.
of Kitty Genovese was she was living in an apartment building and she was killed, I think, in the corridor behind it. So everyone heard her, but nobody helped her. And yellow journalists at the time that it happened, like, made a lot of big headlines out of like, look what the urban world is doing to us. Look at what living together is doing to us. It's making us desensitized. No one helped this woman. That's actually bullshit. In reality, three people called the cops. But the
Oh.
legend persists. But that's what's happening with Laurie Strode. Like nobody's letting her in. And in this, again, like the grown-ups, the parents of all the victims, they are the reason this is all happening.
Hmm.
What do you think about Wes Craven's sort of vision of suburbia?
Mm. That is a really, really great question. Um, I think that when Wes Craven was making Freddy, he said this in the documentary too, that he just wanted to make like this really despicable character. He had all these different kind of elements that we already talked about, but he was saying the fact that he made a character that was a child molester and a child murderer, that
Right.
he just made this like really horrible character.
Hmm.
And um it makes sense that the parents would murder Freddy and have like vigilante justice based upon the
Yeah.
horrible things that he did. But so I think that like when you think about the parents, because you were talking about how like awful the parents are,
Yeah.
I think that them getting vigilante justice on like a child killer and like a child molester, that's not as bad as like them sort of like lying and keeping it from their kids and kind of
Yeah.
treating their kids like, especially when the kids start saying like, oh, there's a guy named Fred Krueger, and they start to kind of tell details about Freddy. Like the parents don't acknowledge it really. They always kind of like, we use the term gaslighting. They like
Yeah.
gaslight their kids a lot in this movie, right? They're like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You need to get
Right.
some
Right.
sleep, right? Um, so I think that's the main sin of the parents is sort of like they're not telling their kids about their dark secret, so their dark secret is killing their kids, literally.
Right.
And
And they're
so,
burying their dark secret and just
r-
pretending it's not there.
right, right. I mean, like one of the images that you see, I think at least twice in this movie, is the children with the jump rope and
Yeah.
and so that's a very like suburban image right there. It's like, these are kids that look like they're from like a Catholic school, and they're just like, doing like a little outside recess
Yeah. Yeah.
activity.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, there's this creepy, sinister guy
Yeah. Yeah.
that essentially, molests them and kills them. So it's like, there's this dark horror that's hidden in the suburban life. And it's interesting, right? Because like in the Freddy dreams, you brought up this really great point where he's striking at places where everyone goes to. All right, like everyone's at school and everyone, they're in their regular suburban houses. But then he brings you to this like labyrinth of a boiler
Yes.
room, and that's like his domain, And I think that um it's this interesting thing because for a little kid, because the idea is that Freddy would bring kids to like the boiler room, his little
Right. Right.
area, and like molest them and then eventually kill them. Um, that would be like an endless nightmarish labyrinth to be in that place
Right.
with this
Right.
man,
Right.
So it's fucking dark and twisted. I mean, if you consider the movies that Wes Craven made leading up to this, The Hills Have Eyes, Last House on the Left. I think he did something else called like Deadly
Friend.
Persuasion or something. Oh yeah, Deadly Friend is after. There's some other one like Sinister Persuasion or something he did
Okay.
before this. But I mean, for such a guy with such a religious background, who wasn't even into making movies till he's 30, he really makes some like fucked up things,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
right?
It's funny as you're talking. There's this idea that the underbelly of a culture, like the underbelly of their little suburbia is what happened. And pair that with, or compare that to, that a boiler room is literally the underbelly of an industrial space.
Right.
Like when kids go to school, the school is heated in the wintertime. They never think about how the school is heated. Right.
Yeah.
Which is, it's funny. My dad used to work in schools, and he worked in like a boiler room like that. It wasn't coal, it was oil. But like I remember going to work with him as a little kid on like a Saturday, which was already weird because it's an empty school. And like his job was like and he'd be like, yeah, you have to go in even on Saturdays because it's such a big system. You can't, the pipes will get frozen. Like you have to put it on every day. And the fire and the heat and the sound, like I still remember it, like these big boilers, and like that's like I always like I experienced that, and it is fucking frightening.
Yes. Yes.
You
I
don't think
mean,
about it. It's like, I mean, if you were to take, honestly, if you were to take any child to
yeah.
to a room like that and go, this is how the heat works, and it's
Yeah.
just scary inferno, they would cry.
Yes, yes, yes. It's funny, right? Because one of Wes Craven's movies that he makes after this movie, pretty soon after this movie too, is the fucking Serpent and the Rainbow, right?
Yes, which is
And
I think one of my favorite non-scream, non-nightmare. I think that could have been a series like Indiana Jones. Like I really like Bill Pullman in that.
Pullman. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But what's interesting about that movie and in this discussion is that like a lot of it is in another country and everything seems so foreign and weird and stuff to Bill Pullman,
Yeah,
and it just seems kind of barbaric in some ways. And then like he kind of brings it back, our
the
world
first
or
world.
suburb. There's this creepy stuff that happens when he brings it back with him, this sort of like this curse, this spirit.
Yeah,
Freddy is born in suburbia. He's born in white bread America. He's not from another planet. He's not
right,
from,
right.
another country, some kind of weird, other
Yeah,
world. He's from here. He just, takes over dreams because of what happened to him.
yeah.
I just want to make it one point too. The movie I was referring to came out in 1981. It's called Deadly Blessing. I've never seen that one.
I've never seen that either.
Yeah, he made a little
TV
side note.
movies.
Yeah, well, he made Swamp Thing too in
Yes,
1982.
I always forget that. I always
Yeah. So Swamp Thing, so basically he did Last House on the Left in 1972, then The Hills Have Eyes, Deadly Blessing, and then Swamp Thing, and then this.
interesting. Wow, Swamp Thing
Yeah.
before this.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Crazy, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. But I mean, you could extend. I don't want to sound like some freshman kid in a film class, but you could extend this to anything, right? Like it could be, the what we did to the Native Americans. It could be slavery. It could be systematic injustice. Basically, Freddy could be a metaphor for any of these awful things that we pretend aren't there, that we
Mhm.
pretend weren't part of our history.
Mhm.
And like you see things like this even more like directly, like in things like Poltergeist, right?
Mhm.
Poltergeist, like literally there's like an Indian burial ground, and they just removed the headstones.
Right.
Like,
Well,
like, yeah.
yeah. Well, do you think that the parents like it's wrong that they did vigilante justice to Freddy, or like is that the reason why the kids are paying the price?
I I do, not that I think, not that I don't think child molestation and murder is the worst thing, but I think it's a miscarriage of law and order. Like somehow, well, actually they say like just because somebody didn't sign a search warrant, Freddie got off on a technicality, which is crazy. Like the
Mm.
idea of my head canon is that I see this as a sequel to the German expressionist film M by Fritz Lang. Have you ever seen M? It's
I
an
have
old
not.
German movie. It stars Peter Lorre, who might know from Casablanca, or Bugs Bunny would do impressions of him a lot. And
Yes.
he basically M is a it's kind of a thriller. He's a child molester that's like terrorizing this town. And actually, you don't see him for most of the movie. He's represented by a whistle that he does. And in the end, there's like no justice. So all of the parents in the town, basically, they Freddy him. They burn him to death. They catch him and they burn him to death. And I was like, that's the perfect prequel to this.
Wow. I love that you used Freddy as a verb. They Freddied him.
Yeah, for
That was awesome.
when you take somebody and you burn them when you burn them in a and then you
Yeah.
hide the clothes in your own basement or whatever.
Yeah, it was a little elaborate. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because I mean, obviously you're a film guy and you've like done some research and like you know what you're talking about. Have you ever read those books? I believe Skull is the author, where he writes like all these books on monsters and horror movies. I think he did a book called Welcome to the Horror Show, and he did another book called Screams of Reason. Have you ever read
No,
any
I
of
don't
those
think I
books?
have.
Okay. I want to make sure I got the right name and everything, but I'm pretty sure his name is Skull, Skaal. And he did a book that was essentially about like horror, just from like when they had the stage plays of like
Yeah.
Dracula and Frankenstein, all the way up to the slashers and all that kind of stuff too. And he made some really great points about slashers and suburbia, just like you did. And then there's one other book where I can't think of the fucking author's name, but I really got to give them credit. I believe it's a woman, and the book is about like sexuality and slashers and
Oh, Men, Women, and Chainsaws by Carol J. Clover.
yes.
She's the person who coined Final Girl.
Okay. So with that being said, I think if you look at the works of these two authors, they kind of talk about how slashers and horror in general is like you're trying to show that society itself is like diseased or there's something wrong with society, and the slashers are kind of like the product of it, right? And so I think that with like Freddy, even though he's doing this like evil thing and the parents kill this evil being, I think that the dark theme, the thing that's behind it that Wes Craven's probably trying to like get out in his writing is the idea that like Freddy, just as the molester and the killer, is a product of American suburban culture. Like this is like what our culture makes. It makes something like this, and that like you could try to fix it, but if you don't fix it the right way, it actually becomes something even worse. Where now he's a fucking boogeyman and nightmares, you know?
Right. There's no repressing it, or
right?
It because it will come back.
You can't respond to his violence with violence.
Right,
because
right.
I mean, ultimately, and here's the thing, right, is that I know that Bob Shea, the guy that backed it, the producer, he wanted to have that ending where he wanted to have Freddy driving that car that they get in at the end, right? And I think that Wes Craven's initial ending was actually like a happy ending that didn't have that sort of that stinger.
He didn't want to do any more of them. He wanted to do just one.
Right, and so I think that like Wes Craven's idea, if you look at it, if you look at the end of the movie, the way that she ultimately defeats Freddy is she like doesn't believe in him. She just says you're just a dream, and then he like fades as he's trying to attack her. I think that that's kind of like that's like the passive response to his evil instead of having a violent response to his evil where you're you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because it's not like turning away and pretending it's not there. She acknowledges him, but she doesn't give him any like power. She says like I'm taking away all the power I gave you.
And see, Mike, you and I are recording, which means that we have to mention The Last Jedi.
Sure, yes.
Because every time we fucking record something, we have to mention The Last Jedi.
Yes.
I don't know how we're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, but that's a big thing about Luke that people don't seem to pick up on Luke Skywalker, which is that in his victories that he has, he chooses not to fight. He chooses not to do something.
Right.
And that's how he wins. That's how he wins in Return of the Jedi. That's how he wins in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
And that's the way this movie ends. It's not like she like shoots a gun and Freddy blows up or something. She chooses to
It's true. Yeah. It's and as the series went on, they would come up with different ways to defeat Freddy, and none of them are better than this. This is the best way to defeat him.
Exactly. It's very similar. It's very similar to did you ever watch the Merlin miniseries with like Sam?
I did. I certainly did.
That's how they fucking get rid of Queen Mab.
Yes.
Spoilers. For this like 30
for a miniseries from like 1996 or something.
From NBC, yes.
Sam Neill.
Yes.
I had the script of it. I bought the VHS and it came with a commemorative script. I was so into that show.
Hey, dude, if you ever want to do a PCMC episode on that, I'm there.
This is why in high school I was just getting laid left and right.
Oh, like, I know.
I see Merlin last night.
Yup. I remember when I met you in college, I was like, oh man, that guy, he gets all the ladies because of his Merlin knowledge.
Yeah.
Dude, I think we've gone like 30 minutes or more in this discussion. We haven't mentioned Robert Englund.
We should. Yes, we should. He's an incredible actor. I do like what he's doing here more than what comes later, but that's the writing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, and this was like his first real big thing, right? He had done like little things. I think he had done what's that movie?
He did V. That was like his big thing before this. Yes. Yeah. Did you ever see V?
No, I never have.
Yeah, well, so we're talking about our childhood and like stuff scaring the shit out of us. V was very scary. It came out maybe like a year or two before this, and the imagery from that still kind of haunts me. This idea of like these visitors coming from another planet, and they pretend to be these sort of noble human-looking creatures, but they're actually like lizard people underneath, right?
Mm-hmm. And
there's so many images of like them getting their masks ripped off, and you see kind of their lizard faces. Robert Englund was one of the lizard people, but he was a good one that was trying to help humans.
Okay, he's and this is not. I mean no offense, but
Yeah,
he's an odd-looking fellow, and I
sure.
think that helps a little bit. Like even what's the other movie I'm thinking of? Is it Dead something? Like it begins with like photography. What the fuck is it?
Well,
Dead.
it's a Robert Englund movie.
Robert England's in it, but it's not like he's not like the main guy, but he's one of the people in it.
I'll look it up. As we're talking about this, Danny and I actually did a review of this RoboCop documentary called RoboDoc,
Uh-huh.
and it was like fucking fantastic. It was 4 hours talking about RoboCop, and it's by
Dead
these
and
guys.
Buried, by the way. Dead and Buried from 1981.
Okay. What I was gonna say was that these guys, they did this RoboCop documentary. They've done one on the It miniseries that we watched when we were kids,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And they just do these documentaries on like things from the 90s and the 80s. They did a whole documentary on the filmography of Robert Englund.
Wow.
Yeah. And I want to check it out too. So they probably mentioned that movie. So what's up with that movie? Why were you mentioning it?
It's a horror movie that I'm not sure when he did it. It was in uh Dead and Buried. 1981. So he did do it before A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Um it's a good movie, but he's that's the thing. He plays like I don't know if he speaks in it. He plays like a town weirdo.
Okay.
Because he's got an odd look to him. Um but yeah, I mean again, like people talk about like Freddy or Jason. It's like Jason was played by a lot of different people. Kane Hodder tries to act like he's the best Jason, but like he was only in the last couple.
Yeah.
Robert Englund is Freddy. I mean, Robert Englund and Freddy is like, like one of these things like Bela Lugosi and Dracula, or Gene Wilder and Willy Wonka. Like the actor and the part are the same.
Right. Synonymous. Yeah. Totally agree. And I mean, when I was watching that documentary, they obviously went through the whole course of the making of the movie. And so they eventually get to the part where Robert Englund comes on set, or not when he comes on set, but when he gets like interviewed for the part and stuff. And it just felt so magical, like when he was coming on, because it was like, oh, then this guy, he had theater experience, and then he had done a couple of other movies, and then V. But then when he comes into this, they just knew he was right for the part. He was
Yeah.
saying that like his friend brought him to the audition, and his friend was smoking. He took his the ashes from his friend's cigarette and like gave himself some eyeliner underneath his eyes, and he just kind of stared at Wes Craven like intently, and Wes Craven's like, oh, this guy's got something. So
Right.
I think he's just something else in this role, like you said. When they had the glove, there was all different versions of the glove. There was like, a glove with like fake knives, and there was glove with real knives. And he said the very first thing that he did is what a lot of people in the movie did, was he accidentally cut himself with it when he first
Hmm.
put it on.
Interesting.
Yeah. And he said that like over time, like when they would have like lunch and stuff, he would still be in the costume, and he would kind of fuck around with the knives on his fingers. And once he started kind of playing around with it and putting things on the knives, then he got used to it. And like that glove is just as iconic as his sweater and his
Yeah.
look.
I mean, we haven't really talked too much about that too, but what a crazy unique, I mean, weapon. I mean, that alone is such a high concept idea. If you just did a boring slasher movie where the guy just has a knife glove, you'd be like, okay, that's still interesting. Like
Yes.
it's wild. It's wild. I think Wes Craven has talked about how like hands or like hands holding hands is an image of friendship and togetherness, and so the idea of like the hand being the thing that hurts you,
Yeah.
and also it's like it makes him like an animal.
Yeah. It's like feral. He had a cat at the time when he was making this movie, and that kind of inspired me. He saw the cat scratching at something. He's like, oh, that's what we'll do. Yeah, that the glove is like in all of the posters for all the movies. It's on this movie. It's like right over
Yeah.
Nancy's head, that iconic poster for the movie. Um,
Or that scene
it's
where she's in the bathtub, which is another scene where we're not in the dream, we're outside the dream. Where actually she doesn't,
right.
he's not even aware of what's happening. That is all for us, the audience, to
Yeah.
be scared.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. It's a very Hitchcock kind of thing, right? Because Hitchcock is like, if the audience is aware of the danger, but the
Yeah.
main character isn't, right? Um, the like that scene, that's like another great example of just like iconic imagery, a scene that like stands the test of time. This movie came out 1984, so what is that? That's like almost 40 years ago now at this point.
Jesus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're old, right?
Yeah. Um, this is just one little note I took.
Sure.
Johnny Depp's in this movie. This is his first film. Do you remember when Johnny Depp was like a real person?
Yeah, I
Like
do.
that was like a weird pirate wizard.
Yes.
He's like
Did you
such a
want?
normal person in this.
Yeah. Did you didn't watch that Netflix documentary Depp versus Heard, right?
No, no, no.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
I mean we don't have to go into that, but you're right. He has kind of become this like caricature at this point. Uh, he has some movies in the beginning of his career where he is playing a regular person and he's
yeah,
real endearing and intense. In this he plays he's kind of against character in this, right? He's very
yeah,
innocent and
yeah.
at one point, Tina and her boyfriend are off like having really loud sex in another room, and
Yeah.
he's with Nancy, and there's no parents. They could do whatever they want, but he's like, "Oh, we can't."
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, she's like the virginal final girl, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so and that's also reflected in Scream. He comes through the window and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Let's talk
But
about Nancy a little bit. Oh, and
sure.
Final Girls. Um, so if Laurie Strode is in some ways like the first final girl in this kind of subgenre,
Hmm.
I think Nancy's my favorite final girl
Hmm.
because she's so active. Basically at the end she home alones Freddy,
Yes, he does.
and she's such an endearing actor. And even though she's virginal and wears like pink cardigans and like slacks, um, it doesn't stop her from being smart and tough.
Hmm.
Like she's
Right.
tough on her. I love the scene where she's like is confronting her mother for being an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And when the mother puts the bars on the window, she like goes in and yells at her mother. Like I love how she's like she's such a fighter.
Hmm.
And him and her have such chemistry together, which is honestly something you don't see a lot in these types of movies. Like they have chemistry as villain and protagonist.
And Final Girl. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was you and your brother, right? Talking about Halloween.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you guys were saying how like Laurie Strode doesn't really do much, right? She just is.
She's not in the movie until like the last 15 minutes. She meets Michael in the last 15 minutes.
Yeah. So it's funny because she's like the iconic final girl, but yeah, I mean Nancy is much more of like in that role. She kind of meets the
Yeah.
criteria a lot
She
more.
puts it together. She puts the
Yeah,
mystery together. Like when she
yeah,
sees her friends start to die, she's the one who's like, okay, wait, we're all thinking about the same person. And even the kids are like, oh no, that's not possible. Like everybody tries to like just ignore it, and she won't.
right. Which is interesting about that, right? Because you keep talking about how everyone keeps comparing it to Jason, and they're like Freddy or Jason, right? In those movies, you'll have final girls too, but they're not as like active as
Right.
Nancy or clever. They just sort of survive by coincidence. Whereas like
Right.
Nancy, like at one point she's like, I can't wake up from a dream. Like, it's just a dream. And then she like burns herself on a pipe, which makes her
Yeah.
wake up.
Yeah. And
You know,
she comes up with, in a lesser movie, she would go see like an old wise man and he'd go, you have to grab him out of the dream. But she doesn't do that. She figures it out herself because she
right,
takes his hat. So
right.
she really comes up with everything.
Yeah,
And maybe it's because she's fucking alone. Her
yeah.
dad, his parents are divorced. The dad is seems to be really not in the picture very much, other than when his daughter's mixed up in a murder. And
Yeah.
mom is this crazy lush.
Yeah.
So she's probably used to raising herself,
Yes.
and that's why she's so tenacious.
Yeah, yeah. She asks her dad to help out at the end. She's like, I'm gonna go to sleep. I'm gonna get this guy. You have to come here at this time to get him, to shoot him or whatever. And it's so funny that that sequence actually kind of made me laugh watching it again because like he's investigating Johnny Depp's
Yeah,
murder right next door.
right.
And then she's just screaming from the house across the street saying, like, Dad, come save me. He's in the house.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's this one stupid fucking cop who's on his team that's like, oh, maybe I should get the chief. You know,
yeah,
he's just
yeah, yeah.
standing there. Um, and
And
then
that guy is the sheriff in Scream. That
oh,
actor. Yeah,
oh, look at that. Okay, okay, wow, wow, small
yeah,
world. But I was gonna say that, like, you know, the dad comes over. This part was really weird to me. I was kind of wanting to get your opinion on it. He comes over and Freddy is burning the mother alive in
yeah,
bed.
yeah,
And then he like knocks Freddy over, and then the mom just kind of fades into the bed. She like gets
yeah,
absorbed, her burned corpse gets absorbed, you know, into the bed.
yeah,
And then Nancy basically tells the dad, just give me a minute, I'll be okay. And then he just walks away.
yeah. It's
Like,
weird.
don't you, isn't it weird? Like,
I think, yeah, but I think you can extend the metaphor of their their blinders being on. Like
okay,
even like I mean, literally, you were just investigating Johnny Depp's murder. How does a kid? How does the blood get on the fucking ceiling? Like
right.
it's impossible. This is magic.
Yeah.
But I think it's like you can't fathom like not only is this thing that you buried coming back, like you're living in a world where there's magic like this. It's like he wants to, it's continuing to be like, no, this isn't really happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like,
Yeah.
again, you can be like, this is a metaphor for racism, sexism, any of the things class injustice. A lot of the things that we pretend aren't really there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that's a really
yeah,
good point. I mean, he sees his fucking charred corpse of an ex-wife just like descending into this blue haze, and it's like, okay, I'll go
yeah.
outside. You
It's
know,
such a great image too.
it
It's so
is. It
weird.
is.
It's so
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Um,
reminds me of something from like Carpenter, really, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 Speaking of Carpenter, he said something so stupid the other day.
Uh-oh.
He said something like, I saw the Barbie movie and it went right over my head. I have no idea what it was. And it's like, shut up, boomer, you fucking idiot. Like, I do love John Carpenter, but what a stupid, don't say anything about the Barbie movie. Like, no one needs your take on the Barbie movie,
Yeah.
dummy.
You know, it's funny because the reason why Danny's not here, we were gonna have Danny be on the show too, is that he's at New York Comic Con right now.
Yeah.
And Danny actually just sent me before I got on here with you a picture of John Carpenter because he's in a panel right now watching him talk.
Awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had tickets to see him talk a few years ago, but he like got sick and everything was refunded.
Uh,
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
absolutely.
Although I think Wes Craven is superior. Now I do think that like the Thing is an incredible movie. I think Thing is better than Halloween. I think that's his best movie.
Yeah.
But I think Wes Craven's just clearly like an intellectual. Like
Mhm.
he's like the Edgar Allan Poe of slasher directors. Like
Mhm.
he's got things that he's really thinking about. And then the worst is like Sean Cunningham. He's just like a carnival barker. He's
Yeah.
like, let's have him jump out of the boat. That'll be scary, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta have a stinger at the end of like at the end of Carrie. Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Exactly the end of Carrie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
No, I know. Like Wes Craven is this like soft-spoken, intelligent guy.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So before we wrap up, since we're sort of wrapping up this whole month-long Halloween journey into slashers,
Mhm.
what are your favorite slashers? When you think of slashers, like what for
Sure.
you like comes to mind?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's kind of a fun question to answer. Like I said, Scream is probably my favorite slasher.
Yeah.
Like out of all of them, right? I love the original Scream. I love the franchise.
Mhm.
I love there's a French movie called High Tension or Haute Tension, right? That's a slasher movie too,
Yeah,
and that's really suspenseful. I love that one.
I've never seen.
Um, I love the original Halloween, and I went back and watched all the Halloween movies, like with you. You know, we actually did the Rob Zombie
Yes,
Halloween
yes.
movies, right? I love Michael Myers. But I really just like the first one. I even kind of like the David Gordon Green one a little bit. I know
Really?
that might be a
Wow.
little bit of blasphemy right now, but it's
Doing great right now in his career.
yes, yes, yes. Um, but yeah, it screamed for me. I used to love Jason. I used to think that Jason was the best out of all of them, but I don't know. I don't really want to rewatch those movies anymore for some reason.
I did a rewatch of all the Jason movies a couple years ago, and
Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised. Like they don't stand up in comparison to all these other things, but they're
Hmm.
fun. Jason movies are like really fun,
Yeah.
kind of like fun houses. You know,
Hmm.
they're like candy. They're not a steak dinner. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing nutritious there,
Right.
but it's like if you want like a slasher where it's like I'm gonna see cool deaths, I'm gonna see pretty girls without their clothes on, like all
Yeah.
of those things.
Hmm.
You get that from that series. There's
Yeah.
also like no huge peaks and huge lows. It kind of just is in the middle the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. You do you like I Know What You Did Last Summer, or you don't?
That's such a good question. When I was super into Scream, I loved it because it was like it came out before Scream 2 and it was
Yeah.
written by the same writer. So it was like, oh, well, this is more of that. So I was like obsessed with it at the time. I haven't gone back and looked at it really in a long time, so it's hard to really say how I feel now. But I was
Yeah.
obsessed with it at the time.
Oh, okay. Wow. What do you think makes a good slasher?
A good slasher film or like a good slasher villain.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I guess like is that synonymous? Like, do you have to have a good slasher villain to make a good slasher?
I don't know if that's no, I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
What makes a good slasher? I really think and maybe I'm just going too much by the book, but I really think it helps if you go by the Halloween, thing of it's about the return of the repressed, the Freudian thing of the return of the repressed, right? Something tragic happened in the past that we're all trying to forget about and move on from.
Yeah.
And um, you know, basically I guess what I'm saying is it has to be more than just cool kills. It has to have a story and it should have characters you care about. It shouldn't just be, I mean, the worst slasher movies are when they introduce like five characters and they have nothing, like, oh, you're the funny guy, you're the one who likes to cook or whatever, you're the pothead, and it's like there's nothing to them. You're just waiting for them to die.
Right.
Good slashers, like look at the characters in Scream. Like
Yeah.
all of even the killers, like all of the characters are interesting. They're
Yep.
real characters.
Yep.
You know,
That's exactly the point I was going to make, is that I think that the characters in the slasher are the most important part. And it's during that time, like in our youth, like it was like Kevin Williamson
yeah.
made a few of these. He made Scream, he made I Know What You Did Last Summer. And
Halloween
he just
H2O.
right, right, right. And he would make this great dialogue. He would write this great dialogue for these characters, and they were all believable and they were all clever, and they pointed out what they knew about slashers to
Yeah,
begin
yeah.
with, right? Um, and Nancy's so great in this. I couldn't tell you like characters' first names from any of the Friday the 13th movies.
No, no, right, right. And I just literally watched the first one, and I can't remember. Alice, Alice is her name, but
Right.
two, three, four, five. I don't remember. I can't even think of them.
You just kind of refer to them as the actor's name, like, oh, that's Corey Feldman. That's
Right,
what's
right, right, right.
fucking dad from Back to the Future. What's his
Yeah,
name?
yeah, yeah. Crispin
Yeah.
Glover.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And
Yeah.
Mike, you haven't pointed out that we're recording this on Friday the 13th.
Yes, this is Friday the 13th that we are recording this. Yeah, it just worked out this way. Um, this the but when you're listening to this, it will be the 25th of October.
Oh, nice.
And this week, but in real time, where you and I are, the Friday the 13th episode came out this week.
Yes.
Which was I gotta say, looking back at this month-long experiment, I liked I think it was good. I could have done so much more. I could have started with a Psycho episode, but I didn't. I said I've only got 4 episodes, and that's you have a horror podcast. I just have 4 year to sort of like be like, this is our Halloween. Try to make it thematic. And it was fun getting to go back and look at all of these things, especially like their original texts, because they all become different. They all become different. I mean, especially Friday the 13th, because it's the first one is not. First one's a whodunit, like Scream. It's not Jason. It's who is it?
Right.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Sleepaway Camp?
I have not. I know how it ends, and I think I've watched like the dead meat of it, where it's like they go the kill count, where they just talk about all the kills. But I've not seen it. No.
What about Pieces? Ever see Pieces?
I have not seen Pieces. No.
There's. It's funny. Like we talk about like these major ones, but there's a ton. Silent Night, Deadly Night. You've seen that?
Yes, I have seen that.
Yeah, that's a
Black Christmas.
Yeah. There's the Prom Night. There's so many. This was like a big, huge thing. And what's interesting is like it was such a conservative time in America, right? You had Ronald Reagan as the president, and then even outside of America, in the UK, you had Margaret Thatcher. So you had like this very conservative values. And you have these slasher movies, but these slasher movies themselves, a lot of them have conservative values because they're saying like if you have sex, something bad will happen to you.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. They are morality tales in themselves. You know?
Yeah. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being here. Tell the listeners where they can listen to more of your content.
Yeah, of course. So like Mike has said a couple of times, I have a show called The Lassercast, and it is on YouTube. You can look it up, The Lassercast, on there, LASSER. And we also have a podcast too that you can find on Spotify, all your different podcast providers. We, made hundreds of episodes at this point, me and Danny.
Wow.
And this month we are covering Fall of the House of Usher TV show by Mike Flanagan, and we are also covering like basically all these movies that are in the theater right now. Danny just sees them and reviews them. We're actually meeting up with your good friend David Weiner on Monday. We're going to be talking about In Search of Darkness, 1990 to 1994, which is his next big documentary. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Yeah.
And besides that, I have one other channel too, which is called Comic Books Transformed, where I talk about comic book adaptations with my friend Brian. And you can look that up on YouTube, Comic Books Transformed. There's also a podcast too. And we just basically talk about comic books that have been adapted into streaming shows and movies. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. I want to thank the listeners for listening to these Halloween episodes. We love Halloween, and literally we work on it all year long. I'm thinking about Halloween ideas. I want to thank my guest, Peter, Last Voyage of the Demeter. We end the episode by saying,
go bye-bye.